Hey everybody, we're going to do a JLU installation. First thing to do is take and spread your parts all out. This is kind of all of them. We've got all the hardware bags sitting on a table. We're going to be moving between the table and the Jeep doing the install, but here's all the parts. Okay, so now that you got your hard top off and everything's disconnected, we want to start a couple of prep items. One of them is going to be on the tailgate latch. Just take a piece of masking tape, put it on the front and the back, and what you want to do is you want to pre-mark the height of the latch itself, kind of go right about center, because we're going to loosen these two bolts for the Giraffe Bracket to go in here. And if you put it up tight here, you also know that when you need to push this forward as the final adjustment, it's in line. So that's an easy tip that will come in handy as we get to the final installation. All right, so to put the Giraffe in, once you get everything loosened up, I already had it loose. So this is a T40 that's going to loosen this up. You'll see that it drops down, so this is why you want to make sure that you have everything marked. We're just going to loosen this so we can stick the Giraffe in, head facing forward, legs down between. Roughly about the height of the top is where you want to kind of have it. Just to put it in here, just kind of snug it up. And that'll be the last adjustment of the full installation. So that's the first step and the last adjustment. Okay, so one of the things that's different with the subwoofer wall from the non-subwoofer wall is the plastic down here at the base. Now this is up to you if you want to do it. If you want a clean look, you can razor blade this part off, and that allows the multi-bend bracket to sit flush and come up the body wall nice and tight like this. If it was in place, it can still be done, but it'll sit like that and you'll have a little bit of gap. It's totally up to you on how you want to do it, but for this installation, we're going to trim that piece out so it sits flush. So now with this in place, we'll just set this in and put the carpeted piece back in place with all the bolts, and we'll tighten that all up because we're done with it at this point. Okay, so now we're going to put the rear wall brackets in. On the subwoofer, you can see that the one on the subwoofer side's a little bit different shape. If you have the non-subwoofer, it'll look just like this one, but reversed. That's so when it sits on, it'll sit on the plastic right here for the subwoofer, and this one will sit over and down. And you want to have the flat sides on this towards the middle. This way, when you do the folding wall, this isn't in the way. So you can just put these on loosely right now. Just put the nuts on. We'll tighten these up as one of the last adjustments, and after we get the wall in place. So just kind of do that like that, and we're good to go for now. Okay, so now we're going to start putting the wall and the miscellaneous pieces together. This is a lot easier to do on a table versus getting in and out of the Jeep all the time. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab the two wing walls. This is the wing wall that goes around the subwoofer. It's a little bit different shape. If you don't have the subwoofer, it's going to look just like this. So we're going to take the wing walls and the vertical frames, which are these, where the opening is at the bottom. So that's where the wall will fold down. So we're going to be able to set these right on top, right on the middle bolt holes. We're going to take 1/4 inch bolt, come in from the back side, and we're going to do just the two middle ones. Don't worry about the top hole in the wall or the bottom one. That's where the bracket goes. So we're going to put nut bolt washer on, and we're going to do this on all 4. 2 on the left, 2 on the right, and then we're going to flip them over. So use a 7/16 socket. You can go ahead and tighten this almost all the way up so you get ready to put the other one in. Once you get these 2 in, you can tighten this part all the way down. This will be the first thing that you're going to completely tighten and not worry about. And again, it's just these 2 bolts on each wing wall assembly. So that one's tight. You don't have to over tighten it. These are nylock nuts. They got a nylon insert. They don't have to be torqued. Come over and we'll do the other side. I like putting a towel down or something to protect the powder coat from scratching, just so it's not sitting on concrete, sitting on the ground. You can do it that way. It's up to you what you've got available, but I always try and protect it as much as I can until we're ready to finish with it. So these are both tight now, and what we're going to do is flip them over, and we're going to take our 1/2-inch foam, and we're going to go down and put it on the flat spot right here, because this is where the wall goes, and we want that to be protected so it's not metal on metal, and it's also not loose and rattling. So go ahead and cut that to fit, peel it, stick it on both sides. Stay a little towards the away from the wall part. This way it has more surface contacting the wall. So once you have that in, that is the first part of the wall assembly, and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so now we're going to put the wing skins together. So these are the main wing skins. This is the driver's side. Driver's side has the cutout. This is for your hardtop wiring and the windshield washer fluid tube that will go up through this. So that's driver's side, this is passenger side. And then what we've also got for the JL, which is new, is these corners. So if you're running a soft top, these don't need to be installed because your factory plastic corner goes right around this end. But for this application, we're actually going to be putting the hardtop back on, so we're going to put these corners in. So you'll see that they've got a bend down on the tab. You want that to go under so it sits flush across here. So we're going to take a bolt, nut, and washer, flip it over, and put this on all the way tight. What this does is this makes a nice corner piece for the skin and for the hardtop to sit on it completely. So once that's on like that, tighten it down, leave it, flip the other side over, do the same thing, just like that. once you get this done and tightened up, you can see how this makes a nice solid piece all the way around. The hard top will sit on this corner right here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to install the wire cover plate. Now you can do this either way you want. I like to leave it on top. That way it kind of matches up, but if you want, you can put it underneath. But it makes a little trap for when it's closed up for water to get on. And that's why I like to have it on top this way. So what we'll do is we'll take and put a bolt through. Powder coat might be a little thick, so just go ahead and pop that. It's okay. This one's got a little bit more on it than normal. We're going to take a nut and washer. This is a lot easier to do on a table than when it's in place. If you got small hands, it's not so hard, but it definitely makes it a little bit more difficult. So we're going to tighten that up and then move on to the next step. Okay, so now that you got the wire cover on, what we're going to do is we're going to flip these over so it's just like this. This makes it easy to put the foam on. What you're going to do is just stretch out the 2-inch foam. You're going to go from this end all the way down. If you do it while this piece is in place, if you're going to be using it, it's easier to install. If you're running the soft top, you only go down to the angle corner. So I am going to cut this. I'm going to actually do it all the way down because I know that this is a hardtop only application. So we'll cut it right about there. You can trim it with a razor blade or scissors as you need it. Make sure it doesn't stick on you when you pull that off. And you want to go right about to the edge. And you can do the curvature with it. So you're going to come all the way down, press it in, trim it while it's pliable, and because this is going to be sitting on, we want to do this little section here. I'll do that last after I get the other side, because you want to make sure you've got enough for the full ends. So now it's going to come down right there. Trim that part flat. That way I'll reverse it. Put these right there so they're not blowing around in the wind. And this 2-inch tape is to protect the body so you don't have any scraping metal on metal and damaging your paint on your vehicle. So I'm going to trim this. So it's got a nice corner to it. And then we're going to finish off this portion right here. Doesn't have to be perfect, just because you want to cover the full metal on metal. So peel and stick. Cut this off just a little shaping. So it covers that, and then we'll come back here, trim this. So it's right even on the edge, and then do this section, right about there. Yeah, good. And once that's trimmed, that's how you put the foam on. Now if you ever have to switch to being soft top with this, all you would do is just take a little razor blade and cut that angle so you can pull this piece off by itself and you don't have to worry about taking the whole skins off. So once you get that done, flip them back over, and we're going to work on the next part. Okay, so now that you got your foam on, one last thing that you want to do is, if you're running a soft top, you don't have to, but if you're running the hard top, you do need to take the foam out of the rear hole, because that is your hard top alignment pin, where it goes on both sides, and then also your rear bolt and your center bolt for the hard top. So you can do that with just a little use of the scissors. Be careful, don't cut yourself. Razor blade, whatever you need. Just kind of peel that out. Make sure you get the alignment pin out also, because that will keep your top from going into place. So just simply peel them out. It's a lot easier once it's completely on from the back side. Move over. And one thing is I'm noticing is when you do this in the sun, this metal gets very hot. So be cognizant of that. If you can do it in the shade, do it in the shade. It'll be a lot easier on your hands. But we're going to get all 3 holes on both sides. And then we're going to work on the fork plates. The fork plates are the security feature to keep people from prying up on the side thinking that they can get into your Jeep when the top is off or the soft top is on. So the fork plates are universal. They fit both sides. That's these 2 square holes right here. So you're going to flip it over, and it's going to sit flat over those holes and have about a 1/4 inch gap here. And what we want to do is we want to put these on about 2/3 of the way tight. This is definitely going to help on the subwoofer side because it's going to be extremely difficult to get your hand in there with the shape of the subwoofer to complete that. So I'm going to put these bolts in on all 4 and tighten them about 2/3 of the way up, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so now that you've got the fork plates on, this one shows a little bit of gap, a little bit of movement. This is what we want. You might want to tighten it up just a little bit more, but this one is too tight because you've got barely any movement. Reason why you want to have a little bit of gap on this is where the body tub goes in between the 2 pieces, and that's what keeps people from prying the sides of it up. So now that we've got that loose, it's really easy on the driver's side to get your hands up in there. It's just this one, the forward one, is really hard to get to on the subwoofer because that's right where it is that you're coming up into, and you can barely get your hand in there. You can still gain access to the back one, but the forward one's a little hard. So what we're going to do now is, I found that after doing dozens and dozens of installs, one of the steps that's real easy is on the wing wall for the subwoofer. This is the subwoofer side. We want to take this whole assembly, and what we want to do is we want to put the bolt in this forward hole right here, because you will not be able to get up at it because of the shape of the subwoofer. So what we're going to do is we're going to take bolt, stick it through, put the wall on it. You can see that this is where the tub of the body sits, and this sits just inside it. So when you do this, pretty much get it lined up with the skin even with the edge of it on this part, so you're not overlapping. And you can tighten this all the way down, because again, this is one spot that you won't be able to get up to. So go ahead and tighten this one all the way down. And this is what I mean about trying to be even right here. The same amount of edge distance all the way as you tighten this all the way up. once that's tight, we're good to go, because now we're going to move on to the next step. Installing this as an assembly makes it extremely easy with the subwoofer. So we'll move on to that. Okay, so now you want to put this whole wingskin assembly in all together. And this is where it takes a little bit of finesse, a little bit of movement. Be careful that you don't scratch anything up. What you want to do is, this is where your fork plate's loose, and it's going to sit between the plastic wall and the body tub, okay? And then the foam is where that's going to sit completely on here. So if you get it to where it's sitting on, and you can see that the holes all line up, just like this in this position, what we want to do is we want to tilt it at an angle so the fork plate drops down kind of about where that plastic is. You can use your finger through this hole right here, or you might have to come around to this side, and you want to just kind of work this in at an angle, sliding down to where it drops into place. My hard top holes are good. They're lined up in the groove. The vertical part goes on the back side of the floor bracket and right around the subwoofer. So right now, I'm in good position with, I can see my hole, and everything is pretty much flat here. Make sure you don't have it sitting on the rubber on the corner. And now your subwoofer's in almost all the way tight. This bolt's not loose at all. This one's a little bit, but this is the one that's easier to get access to. If anyone's going to be loose, have it be the back one that you can reach in from here and tighten that the rest of the way up. So we're going to go ahead and tighten that one up and then move around to the other side. Okay, another thing that we found on some of the older models, the vertical frame channel right here sits pretty close up against the subwoofer. So if you take about 4 inches of the 1/2 inch foam, you can actually peel stick, get an idea. It's about center on the center bolt right there. Put it on the inside of the frame, so that's where it sits up against the speaker, and you won't get any rattle from the speaker. All frames going forward after mid-May will actually have a cutout on this side to help with that, so it's not touching the speaker. Okay, so now that we got the passenger side wingskin, wing wall assembly roughly in place, we want to come around and do the driver's side. So I have done the same thing where I've taken the wing wall and attached it at that front corner. This side you can get to, but for ease of show and tell and keeping it the same, we're going to do this. Come right around. Protect that roll bar so you're not scratching it. And it's going to sit just like this, like the other side. So you make sure that you see where your holes are. Make sure the roll bar is not in the way. And the forward seat belt, all that. So now we have to tilt it at an angle from the inside and work it down in. And as you can see, you can actually get your hand in here and here to tighten up the fork plate bolts. So this is just a kind of an easier thing for general purpose. So kind of watch your fork plate. You can see that it's going down under, and you just kind of work it down in. That side's in. I'll come around to this side. I can pull that down a little bit and spin that around, and it's in place. I got good hard top bolt hole location. Your alignment pinhole is good, and we will go ahead and tighten these up. Now you don't have to tighten these all the way up to where it creases the skin, where it dimples it down. Once the hard top sits on here after a while, that will crush the rubber seal down, so it makes it nice and flat all the way across. But if you tighten this too far, you'll see that you'll start to dimple this, and it will pull down tighter here and not uniform across. So just get it down snug, finger tight, That's all you need. You don't have to worry about trying to get it all the way tight at this point, just because you can see that if I went tighter, it would start dimpling this area, and we want this to sit flat with putting the hard top on. So now that you've got this in, the fork plates are good. They're tightened up on both sides. We'll work on the next section, which is the horizontal frame. Okay, so now that you've got the wing skins in place with the wing wall, we're going to work on the side frames. That's the two long frames here. You'll see that it's got a larger cutout on this end. This is the end that goes into the wall. This allows the top to fold past this section. So all we're going to do here is take the 1/2 inch foam and measure it out and peel and stick it down, and then we're going to install these next. So just get that. Remember, stick it towards the outside or the inside, not up against the wall. This way it has better contact with the folding top sitting on it than up against the wall. So go ahead and do this on both sides. Just like this. Ready to move on to the next step. Okay, so now that we've got the main parts in, we're going to put in the side frames. So like I said, the open end is what goes into the wall. So we're going to start with, we're going to take one bolt and come from the outside, coming this way through the giraffe head eyeball, and you'll see a small hole on the back end. This is where that's going to sit. So you want to just put this in, start the washer and nut, just basically get it in. It will actually hold in place up against that wall when you first start. So get it started loosely and then come around to the wall and do the same thing with coming from the front to the back through the hole in the end of the frame. Now this is where it gets a little hard sometimes if you got big hands to get the nut and washer up in there, but once you get it started, just use an extension on your socket. It's again the 7/16, and just reach up in and go ahead and tighten that all the way up. Make sure it's nice and straight. You can leave the back end loose on the giraffe. Like I said, you can tighten this one pretty much all the way up, and then we're going to move over to the other side. Same thing, put the bolt from the outside coming in on your multi-bend, rear hole. It's going to sit in a little bit on the subwoofer. Actually, you're going to this hole on the multi-bend that's forward of the rear pinhole. You can see it pretty much line up right there. So go ahead and just get that in here. Might be a little awkward holding both at the same time. That's okay. You just want to get this started. Sometimes that's easier said than done. Second set of hands helps. If you're able to pull that out just a little bit, give yourself more room. You can get it to where you can actually spin the bolt too and help. Okay, got it started. Now it's off just a little bit. So we'll back it off. Now it's started. Get it to where that nylon nut on the inside grabs it, and then come around the front, do the same thing. Bolt comes in from the wall. This is going to be a little tight too, but at least you can still get your hand up in it. Sometimes turning your hand upside down, that helps. This is the hardest part with having the subwoofer. It used to be getting that forward bolt, but we found out it's just getting the right steps in place to get that. So once you get this started, spin it on, take this, good, got that, back on. And it's just sometimes holding it the right way, half a turn, until you get it all the way done. You can use a shorter extension if that helps. You won't be able to use a wrench, you got to use a socket. So now that that's all the way tight, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next step. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to actually put the center wall assembly together, because we want to make sure we've got right gaps and everything before we go on to the next steps into almost finishing off the top frames and the top itself. So go ahead and grab your center wall panel. This is your access panel and your access panel spacer. Something that people tend to forget is the spacer goes at the bottom, and you're going to set your hinges in place so that they fold forward or up, and this is where the door goes right here. One thing that we're going to do is we're going to take what we've got left of the 1/2 inch and go about the thickness of the foam this way. So you want to come all the way down to the bottom of the opening for the access panel. This makes this nice and tight as we go. So if you put the spacer down at the bottom, you'll see that you're not going to go all the way to it, but you do want to go all the way up against the edge of the hole, all the way up. Put that in. Come do the other side, top to bottom. About even with the top, because we are going to put a cross piece across the top of the opening. If you go down too far and up against the spacer, sometimes you'll feel that when you're folding the access panel. So now you want to take this and run across the top. So this ends up being about the same thickness as what the spacer is. So when you put your top on, the access panel itself will sit right on it, and this is where your hinges will go through and match up. So we're going to go ahead and do this and then flip it over to put the nuts and washers on. So make sure you get a good fit on that. Sometimes you might have a little bit of thickness in the powder coat. If you do, just use a drill bit or a razor blade to kind of help get it all the way in. That foam's going to also hold it up a little bit, so when you flip it over, hold it till you get this all the way down. I'm going to spin it around so you can see it, and we're going to do the small nuts and washers. On the access panel itself, and then inside here where it's a little tight. I found that I've got a little ratcheting dog bone, which kind of helps with that. An open end wrench or a box end, either one works. You won't be able to get a socket in there, so don't worry about that part. And you just have to snug them down. Don't go too tight, because if you over tighten these, you could snap off the post on the hinge. Even these little ones, I've seen people have done it on the big ones, and it's just because it's being over tightened. And you just want to make sure that you're not doing that. Just get them snug. You'll see that with the spacer, the threads come right up to about the bottom of the nut. That's perfect on that side, on the spacer side. You'll get a little bit more thread out of the panel side, because it's not as thick. You don't have the spacer there. So just get that nice and snug down, and then we will get the other ones on. Sometimes it's easier to do one half of the hinge first. If you find that the powder coat's a little thick on the spacer side, if you don't need to put the washer in, or you don't want to put the washer in so you get a little bit more thread sticking out, that's fine too. Before it comes out. So little guys, gotta find those little washers and the nuts, and go ahead and tighten these all the way up, and then we'll move on to the next section of sticking in the lock assembly. Okay, so now that you got the hinges down at the bottom, you got the foam on the opening, now we want to put the lock assembly in. First thing we're going to do, make sure no washers are stuck to the magnet, is this magnet is a peel and stick. What it is a backing plate right here for the cam lever on the lock assembly. This way it's not metal on metal. So you want to peel it and stick it on about center where the lock hole is, and up about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch from the opening. This way it engages the full lever on the lock when it's moving across it. So not on the very bottom, just move it up a little bit, 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch, that'll be good. And then we're going to put the lock assembly in. So you're going to take the lock assembly, and make sure when you take it apart, when you take the set screw for the cam lever off, there's a little O-ring right here. Don't lose that, okay? We want to stick this up from inside. If it's a little tight, that's okay, because we wanted it a tight fit. So you can pull the key out, make sure that's kind of straight, and just push down on it, or use a hammer, which I'm going to have to since this table's bending, since it's plastic, to knock this in. Set the O-ring off to the side, so that's not an issue. And we want to get this past the powder coat, so you can just do that. You're okay, you're not going to hurt any of the threads. So set it in like that, put the O-ring back in. You might have to adjust the cam lever based on how you've got your key in the lock set. So you want to also make sure the cam lever is bent down. If it's bent up, it won't catch anything, but down it will come across. So we're going to put it right here and see if we're going to be good. You want to take the lock nut, put it on. If you've got an extra washer or rubber gasket, you can put that on. But it's not needed because this is supposed to be metal on metal for tight. Just snug that down. Doesn't have to be over tightened. So we want to set that in just like that. Put your set screw in. Just give it a little part tight, and we'll put the key in. You can see that it's going the right direction, and this is where the foam, being as thick as it is and not crushed down yet, makes this a little tight. So you want to push in on it as you're turning it to get it to lock in the up position. So again, if you want to adjust your key, this one is horizontal. You can go vertical if you want. It's however you want it and what works for you. So we're going to leave it like this for right now, and we're going to set the wall in place and make sure we've got good measurement on both sides. Okay, so now we're ready to stick the wall in. First thing we want to do is we want to put a bolt down in the floor bracket. So this is going to hold this more in place, where it needs to be final position. So what we want to do is we want to grab nut, bolt, and washer, the right size nut, put this on. It can be tightened most of the way up because we want to have a little bit of movement because we're going to move it around left to right when we put the wall assembly in, to make sure that we've got the right gaps, even gaps, all the way around. So we're going to put this in. It's pretty snug. Do this side. That's why we left the floor bracket loose, so we could put these in. Tighten them up. So, with that a little bit loose, what we're going to do now, I'm going to move up in here so it's easier for you to see. I'm going to take the wall. Access panel goes on the driver's side, and I'm going to put it into place like this. I may have to pull it in. It's going to be a tight fit. And what I want to do is I want to take 2 pins and I want to put them in first the bottom. So you raise it up a little bit till you get your hole lined up. This is where the foam is going to be a nice tight fit because it's fresh foam. It hasn't been crushed down yet under pressure and use. So if you need to raise up the bracket or anything to get that pin in. Now the bottom's in, the 2 pins in the lower part. This is where if you want to pull the wall completely out, you just pull all 4 pins, 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom. So what I want to do now is pull this up. It's going to be a little snug. If you want to have a little bit more space, take toothpick or something to put that tight, and you can put it in the gap here, and that'll separate it. Allows this to move a little bit. You might have to loosen this bolt so you can slide it a little bit, but make sure you don't go past center for your hardtop bolts. I personally like the wall in tight. That way I don't have any rattles at all. So once I get this in, I'm going to grab 2 upper pins and we're going to put those in. And they've been sitting in the sun, so they're nice and warm. So, like I said, the foam's going to be thick until it's crushed in a little bit. So you might have to adjust this, push to crush that foam in to get that upper pin to go in, because it's going to be nice and tight. That's the thing that we like about this when we first start doing this, is it's really tight. People ask about if it rattles. It doesn't. But you got to be able to get the pins in. So once you get the pins in, we're going to be good to go, and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so now with all 4 pins in, like I said, it's going to be tight with that foam. is now you check your gaps. Like I said, I prefer to have it as tight as possible. That way it's less rattles. Because until I actually fold the wall down, you do it a couple of times, it's going to be snug. You can put gaps in right here if you want, just by taking a screwdriver and kind of prying it in a little bit to get it over. Just make sure you got good alignment still with your outside holes. But once you do that, you can go ahead and tighten your seat bolts. Because we're done with that step. If you have the leather seats, you're going to have the cover, the flush cover that goes across right here. One thing that we found is you can pop the outer snaps. Don't go too much. Pop the outer snaps to gain access to the seat bolt and come in from the bottom side. That way you're not having to pry it all the way up and then reset all of those tabs, because they can be a little difficult to do first time. So that side's tight over there. This side's got a little bit of a gap down at the bottom. It's about 1/8 of an inch, 3/16 of an inch. I'm okay with that. The wall will eventually move a little bit, so I'm good with that. I want to make sure that I've got a little bit of gap here so it's not up against the plastic. So now the wall's in nice and tight, and we're going to work on securing the top frames and getting the top in place so we've got good dimensions all the way around with it. Okay, so now that we've got the wall in, we're going to start putting the rest of the side frames together, and we're going to do that loosely until we get the hard folding top on, so we can get the gaps on it. So the first thing you want to do is you want to grab the 90-degree tie downs, and now on the JL standard going forward, the first part of May 2019, we've changed the rails up to be this height and length versus what it was. This allows a couple of things. With being 5 inches shorter, this allows the folding soft top to come down and sit nice and flush on the back of Slipstream instead of sitting on the rails. This helps out with that aspect. And then also, if you want to put waterproof covers over the top of it, vinyl covers with having a little bit less height, that works too with it not sticking up, pointing out. So we went a little bit shorter in length and a little bit shorter in height just to make that work better. So we're going to go ahead and start. You can see that there's holes that match up, 3 that are close together on one end versus the other. That's to fit this section right in here. So you're just going to set this right up on top, just like this. You can see where it's shorter here. And all we're going to do is start from the front. And this is where having this wall loose again helps. You're going to put that first bolt through, get that hole to line up, drop that first one in. So just drop the bolts into place. You're going to end up moving the wall around a little bit to get it to line up and drop in, because this stuff's all still loose. This is part of the structure to help get this tight. Leave this middle one open right now because that's where the roll bar filler goes. So we're going to put that in there. This one in here. We're going to move over, grab the nuts washers and stick them on. Just get them started. This way the bolts won't pop out as we're moving stuff around and adjusting. Couple are tight right here at the subwoofer, but you can get your hand up there. I know somebody's going to curse me for that being tight. Apologize, but it makes the system work. This one gets a little close to the bar, the vertical multi-bend coming up, but you still have access to it. Now I'm going to grab the roll bar fillers are these 2 pieces right here. So as you can see, there's a gap in the skin where we went around the roll bar with the whole skin panel. So you just have to make sure you get it lined up the right way, where one hole lines up with that frame. Drop a bolt down in it, grab your nut and washer, finish that up, and then we're going to come over to this side and do the same thing. I always like to start from the front because it's easy to grab the wall to help position it into place. Drop it in. Put a nut and washer on that one so it doesn't pop out right away. And then start working my way down. You have to move the frame in. This is why we're loose at the giraffe end too, so we can adjust. So you've got movement before you tighten everything up. Okay, next one. If you drop a nut or washer, it's okay. We put 40 in the bag, and I believe you're only using 35 or 36 of them. So you will have a couple extras. That doesn't mean you missed parts. It means that we took into account somebody's going to drop one and not want to chase it. The center one is where the filler plate goes for the roll bar. Just slide it in, drop a bolt, and washer. Okay, so now that we've got that, trying to grab that nut I dropped, but so now we're going to move on to set the two folding halves of the top in place. That way that helps us get the right distance and gap for it, and then we'll tighten everything up on the next step. Okay, so now that you got the front one in with all 4 pins just kind of holding it in place in the frame, grab the rear one, line up your hinge holes, and do the same thing with your back 2 pins. Just set them in place. And as you do that, now you're going to have the right gap for your hinges. So you're going to take your large hinges and just drop them into place. And put your washers and nuts on the back side, and we're good to go. Okay, so now that you've got both halves of the top in place, put the hinge in. I went ahead and tightened up all 4 bolts on the forward side. And I want to show you that with it being loose still, you can see that you can have a gap in here. If you want to tighten the gap up, just push it in tight. The pins are in, so you're still in a good pin position for the frame for pulling that in and out. And now it's a really tight split right here instead of having a little bit of gap. So that's when you want to tighten up these 4 rear bolts on the hinges. And we'll be good to go with that. Okay, so one of the things that we found too is when people go to put in this center pin, that's the forward one, the rear one for the large half, it keeps the top from buckling in the middle and bouncing. So we added a pinhole here. Now on the JL, it's extremely tight between the plastic and the frame bar. And some people are having a hard time with that. It does fit in. Basically, the wire comes in under the frame between the roll bar plastic and the frame itself. There's about 1/8 of an inch there. But if you just put the pin in there, you think, oh, I can't get it in. what you have to do is basically go like this. As you put the pin in, push this out and up so it goes up into the hole, so the pin goes in, and that's about as much room as actually going to be holding it on that side. So you just go like this, you put the wire on the other side, and as you start feeding it in, it'll hold just like that. So that way it still holds the top in the center location so it doesn't buckle and create noise. Okay, so now that you got your top in, run through it a couple of times, pull the pins, make sure you've got good gaps. Again, I like mine tight, less rattles. Goes down in, a little tight on this end, but that's okay. With it still in place, put your pins back in. And go ahead and tighten up all 5 bolts on both sides, and that's going to lock in this measurement. Now if you want, you can use toothpicks or something skinny to stick in here to make sure you have a little bit of gap. You just got to make sure that you can still push this way. To make sure that we weren't going too far, I went ahead and put the hardtop bolt back in loosely. Now if you're running a soft top and you don't have the hardtop bolts, that's okay, because the fork plates are here and these bolts, that pretty much holds it in place. Me personally, I like to put a bolt in here so that way it cleans up the look and keeps people from thinking that they can easily walk up and do something to the back of your Jeep. But that's me. So go ahead and tighten up all your frame nuts with your tie-down rails on both sides. Pull my pins so it's a little easier to get these reaching up. It's a little tighter on the subwoofer side, so I have to take my extension off, but I can get on it. Go ahead and tighten them all the way up. I'll move this out of the way. And anything else that you might have loose at this time, like if you still have your floor brackets loose, you can go ahead and tighten them up, and your seat bolts. So another thing that we've gone ahead and done that we've included with the JL, it's not as important with the JL as it was the JK, just simply because of the size of the hard top bolts are a much larger head and washer than what was in the JK. So we did put 6 large washers in that help cover this gap with the oval hole in the wing skin. So if you want, you can use it for the JK or the JL. The JK, it helps clean up that look. You can see it fills most of the hole, so you don't see any gaps and stuff like that. That's totally up to you. We've included them in the kit. There's 6 of them, and there's 3 for each side. So now that we've got the top in and we've got the distance good on the width, the folding, the clearance, and everything, we're going to put in the tail skin. So this is the tail skin that is not for the soft top. Everything after May 1st, 2019 is coming with a notch out of about 1/2 inch. This is for soft top. So when this panel goes to fold, the mechanism sits right here for the soft top, and it's got bolts that stick out. Those in the past would hit right here on the edge of the tail skin as this was folding right here. So now they're all going to have a 1/2 inch cutout. And this is something for anybody prior to May 1st that has an older one. As we have those made, those are free replacement, because we want to make sure that you can use your Slipstream system for both soft top and hard top with no issues. So for the tail skin, we're going to go ahead and put in the 3 bolts right here across the back. So go ahead and put one in on the center. That kind of starts it to hold it while you do the ones on the end. We want to set that in. And this is adjustable up and down. And what that's going to do is that's going to fit in the tailgate groove right here as the tailgate closes. So we want to prep it by getting it set mostly in the correct position. So we want to tighten these almost all the way up. Just before you feel it start to get snug, hold up. Get all three of them the same. And the starting point that I do is I push it all the way up so you can see the slot come up, and this is even or just a little bit higher than the top flat spot. So go ahead and tighten them all the way down, all three in that location. Once they're snug, this is how this will sit the entire time. You never have to remove it. The soft top crossbar goes right across above it. The hard top glass will come down even with it and not hit it. So the tailgate skin is the final closeout for the gap between the folding top and the tailgate. So it's a nice clean look and full security. Okay, we're almost done. So now that the tailgate skin is on and tight onto the top, now we want to make sure that we have the right height adjustment before we try closing the tailgate and finish up. So what you want to do is make sure this rubber gap sticks out from that. So that's good. That'll actually be perfect with how it is. You want this to be as flat as you can. If it looks like it needs to be raised up a little bit, this is why we leave the Giraffe a little bit loose. So you can do this, pop it up, see where we're at. We're as high as we are going to go on this end with this bracket. That's a set height. So as we start to close this, we want to make sure that that's going to fit inside the groove. The other thing you want to do before you start closing it is make sure that your marks still line up that you started with the tape. So these are pretty good. I want to go ahead and just give it a little bit of snugness on it so it doesn't move on me. And this way, as I go closing the tailgate, I want to eyeball the latch coming in and making sure I'm seeing it come in, and also watching the height of the tail skin coming in slowly, that it's not going to hit. So that looks actually pretty good. Might have to go down just a little bit with it. It's about right. But now I'm looking at my latch and it looks like it's going to hit, and I can actually push it closed initially, and I can see that I might be just a little high right here. So this will be loosening the Giraffe and pushing this end down just a little bit without really pushing the Giraffe down. So it dropped just a little bit right there. You're able to see that. So we'll tighten that back up. My alignment marks on the tape are still good. This might take you a couple of times. Take your time, because you want this to be right, because that way it doesn't rub. And we are looking at seals to go out across the back of this. It's also something you can pick up at Home Depot, Lowe's. A little gasket seal fits on there. There should be about a 1/4 inch gap between it and the inside when it's completely closed. So that's a loose close, and you can see that it's sitting well below that lip area. If you want, you can go down just a little bit more. We'll adjust that and then do a final fitment test just a second. So a couple things that we've done now with the JL, with learning a little bit more about it, getting feedback from customers is good on how you use your Jeep and everything. We found that when the soft top on the JL folds back, what it does is it locks in below the body tub line. Now, that's actually going to be an issue for any kind of system that you want to put back here. That's including a vinyl cover anything made out of wood, composite panel, steel, aluminum, whatever, if it sits on the body tub like all security systems or covers do, you're not going to be able to lock the soft top down in place. So a couple of things that we've done to help out with that is we've shortened up our tie-down rails by 5 inches. Before it came all the way to this back bolt, we've moved it up here. This way your bar, your rear bar, comes down and sits completely flat here on the Slipstream shelf. So that makes it nice. So now it's not hitting the rails and sitting on the rails, so you can actually tie it down. Now, one of the other things that we've done, because until you put a bungee or a strap down to hold it down, it's going to be sitting here loose. Just like if it was sitting from the factory setting, your folded panels can still catch air and everything. So what we've done is we actually developed our own cover that will fit for the soft top. So you basically would set it in place like this, put your top down. We've got these wonderful hook and loop mechanisms that are bungee type material with pull tabs with 5 matching hooks that these will go into. So basically, as your soft top comes down, you're wrapping this around it using the hook and loop to pull your top down nice and tight and compact so air doesn't get under it. And then you use straps or tie downs to use the tie down rails here to hold it securely down on the Slipstream, and you don't have any issues with it going down the road, being secure, and knowing that your top is not loose and can bounce around. So that's one thing. So look for this on our website. It's available this May of 2019 as we just came out with it. Anybody that's got a JL that they bought as early as August of 2018 when we first started selling them, the new tie-down rails are available. Go on our website and you'll click on that, so that way you put in your name and address, so we can make sure that it's a JL that you've got. And these new tie-down rails are free to all JL previous owners. So that way this is a free upgrade and replacement, so that way your soft top will be able to sit down on here fully. Now the vinyl cover here, that is for sale if you want to be able to get that. This will also work with the JKs, the TJs, any other top, because it's a nice compact system to hold it all together. And you know, it's something that not even the OEM does. So once again, look for that. Look for the new tie-down rails. Put your order in for those. Every kit for a JL that's coming out after May 1st of 2019 has the new tie-down rails in it. So it's already going to come shorter, so you're ready to go up right out of the box. Now that the whole system's in place, go ahead and put your seats up. Fits up against the wall. You are good to go. All your gear is going to be safe. All your personal stuff, any time you want to go shopping, anything that you want to use your Jeep for, now you've got the full advantage of doing it. And with having the ability to have a fold-down wall that works with the fold-down seats, you're not turning a compartment that would limit you to basically taking your 4-door and making it a 2-door. So now you have full use of everything. Basically close everything up. Everything's tight. Everything's good to go. The gaps are great. You're ready to hit the road and go have fun.